There are many people who are thinking that mission is a good thing, but it is not so important and urgent, and it is an appendix of our own activities in the church. I think that there is the most crucial point for us, to understand that it is impossible to be real Orthodox if we are not faithful to the commandments of Christ. It would be unthinkable to have a Christianity without the commandment of love or the commandment of hope. At the same time, it is unthinkable to have a Christianity without the last commandment. It is a half Christianity, without this go ye and teach all nations. And teach them everything that I told you. And in this everything, it is exactly this last commandment.
The missionary normally works in areas, geographical areas, and cultures that are related to sometimes poverty, underprivileged people, people who are not enjoying the full human rights. Therefore, you go there to offer the gospel, but you cannot do that without sometimes addressing issues of human rights, simply because they are connected directly to the dignity, the value, and the light that the gospel is producing among people.
His Beatitude, Archbishop Anastasios, was born to a religious family in Greece on November 4th, 1929. As a young boy, he was first interested in the sciences. However, his views changed as he experienced 4 years of Nazi occupation in Greece, connected with the horrors and destruction of World War II. He realized that the only way to make sense of this suffering was to work towards a message of eternal peace, a peace that comes only through Jesus Christ. In 1947, when he entered the theological school of the University of Athens at age 18, until this very day, he has dedicated his life and career to fulfilling Christ's mandate.
The work of Archbishop Anastasios is really very extensive and extremely variegated. It's a work that includes theoretical study, theoretical contribution to the missiology. It's a work that includes effort in the field and within the very specific geographic and cultural data, and is a work that has to do with influencing general movements related to mission and missionary work, especially within the Orthodox Church.
As a deacon in the early 60s in Greece, young Anastasios founded the Inter-Orthodox Mission Center Poreftendes. This center would serve to educate the church in the area of missions, as well as to motivate and send missionaries throughout the world. When ordained to the priesthood in May of 1964, he immediately left for East Africa. Soon after contracting malaria, and upon his doctor's recommendation not to return to Africa, he instead pursued his studies in missiology and the history of religions. When the Church of Greece elevated Anastasios Yanelatos to Bishop of Androusa in 1972, they also made him the General Director of the entire Department of Apostoliki Diakonia, the service branch of the Church of Greece. Also in 1972, the University of Athens elected him as their Professor of the History of Religions. There he established and directed a center for mission studies, and in 1976 created a chair of missiology. In the 1980s, then Bishop Anastasios was called to return to Africa to become acting Archbishop of East Africa. One of the first things he did was open the long-awaited Archbishop Makarios Orthodox Patriarchal Seminary in Nairobi, Kenya. He realized that in order to create a strong Orthodox community, he needed to train local leaders using the language of their area.
Archbishop Anastasios had a powerful impact on the people of Africa, beginning with his training and establishment of the foundation of the church, the leadership and the clergy. He opened a seminary. He trained and sent these people throughout the land, and never hesitating from himself going and visiting the most remote and difficult regions of the country, embracing the people and their ways, their culture and their language, and at the same time emanating a love that was felt by the people, that was taught to the people, and brought them into both the fullness of what orthodoxy is and the most powerful examples and moving examples of its ways, which is love.
Most importantly, the acting Archbishop encouraged and empowered, in the true missionary spirit, Orthodox Christians from Africa to nurture and grow the Church, even after he left for Albania in 1991. In January of 1991, Bishop Anastasios was elected by the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople to go to Albania as Patriarchal Exarch. He was enthroned as Archbishop of the Autocephalous Church of Albania in 1992. It was truly a challenge.
Albania had the unique distinction of being the only country in the world which actually passed a law declaring it an atheistic state, in the sense that the law stated that God was illegal. For the Orthodox Church, it meant that it needed to rebuild itself entirely. The church here really began at ground zero. When his beatitude arrived, there were less than 22 clergy, all over the age of 70, that had survived. And also, in terms of worshiping facilities, had more than 1,600 churches and monasteries and buildings. And when his beatitude arrived in the first year of 1990-1991, he found less than 1 or 2% of the churches still standing. And so it is with this beginning that we talk about a resurrection for the church. And the results have been remarkable.
One of his goals was to establish an indigenous church to serve the people. So from the beginning, from 1992, he opened up a theological school to train clergymen. We began our first year with, I think, 45 students, and each year we continued, and over the last 10 years, we've graduated more than 150 students, and 120 of them have been ordained clergymen. Literally, in the 9 years that the church has been open up, thousands and thousands of people have come for baptism. I'm a young priest of only 6 years, and I can say within 6 years serving as a priest in Albania, I've baptized probably more than 1,000 people. So it's truly one of the miracles and one of the greatest signs of the resurrection of our church here has been the resurgence of faith among the people and people flooding into the churches. In Tirana, every week, our cathedral is packed.
The first time I met Archbishop Anastasios in 1991 in Korica, Albania, was when he was visiting the Mitropolit building, and throngs of people engulfed him to touch him and see him, because it was the first time in perhaps 50 years or in their lifetime that they come to see a bishop in their town. He was a very gentle man, and I spoke with him briefly and noticed that he had tremendous spiritual and leadership qualities. As an Albanian Orthodox, I can state unequivocally that what he has done for the Albanian Orthodox Church is beyond measure.
He then began the vision of Diakonia Agapis, which is the official social development and emergency office of the Orthodox Autocephalous Church of Albania. In 1997, the distribution of more than 15,000 food parcels to 15,000 people in desperate need. In 1998, we began our outreach by clothing the Kosovo refugees who had arrived in Albania. In 1999, the church's Diakonia Agapis had a program of approximately $8.5 million in which more than 50,000 people were helped. And now in 2000 and 2001, we continue to maintain the only refugee camp collective center here in Tirana, or in Albania, I should say, as well as building more than 8 elementary schools to thank the Albanian communities who had helped. So as you see, I give you so many details only to have you understand the considerable outreach and impact that the church is having on people's lives, and that is the miracle that we live here every day.
He's a businessman. I mean, it's kind of hard how you say an archbishop is a businessman. The archbishop has the very unique talents from my perspective. I mean, he's got one of the biggest construction companies in the country. I mean, he understands, that you need to have business practices. He understands that you need to have standards of accountability. He understands that, you have to be accountable to your donors. That's what makes the relationship with IOCC and the Archbishop the strongest of any relationship that we have. Simply because of the fact, yes, he is a spiritual leader who understands the need for accountability. And in the environment that we work in as far as IOCC, getting government grants and donations from individuals in the U.S., that's critical.
I think the Archbishop also has taught people to respect one another regardless of one's faith, ethnicity, or background. He often says a Christian should never have enemies. All people have the image of God. They are all His children. And our work as Christians is simply to help everyone go forward on their journey toward God. Another thing, the Archbishop has taught people to love and serve one another. The Archbishop has always emphasized that we cannot remain indifferent or inactive, disregarding the suffering of others. One of his favorite sayings is the oil of religion should never be used to ignite the fires of hatred, but should be used to soothe and heal the wounds of others.
Archbishop Anastasios believes that the Church must be a factor of unity and not division. He continues to petition the government for the return of holy icons and churches, which he explains is a necessity if the Church is to exist. Not returning the property is an attempt to hinder the growth of the Church. The vision and influence of Archbishop Anastasios has moved and continues to move thousands around the world. In 1963, he served on the Commission on World Mission and Evangelism of the World Council of Churches. He has written countless books and papers explaining the Orthodox perspective on missions and the future that missions holds in this society. In 2000, he was one of the main speakers at the Assembly of the World Council of Churches. And most recently, he was nominated for the prestigious Nobel Peace Prize.
In a telephone conversation with the Archbishop, he very humbly told me of this action, and I could almost sense that he was embarrassed to tell me, because he was stating that this is not for me, but this is for the Orthodox people.
As a young man, Anastasios Yanolatos truly believed that missions and missionaries were vitally important to the life of the Church and to her growth. He has lived his entire life working to spread orthodoxy into the corners of the world.
I think when you meet the Archbishop, whether it's the first time or the 100th time, you realize that you're walking and meeting with a spiritual giant. He made a major impact on my life from the day I saw him. It's just the way he lives his life. You can see it in his eyes, you can see it in his smile. Here's a man that's very at peace with himself and walking with God.
My father tells me that he attended the ordination of the young Anastasios Yanolatos, and in his journal that day he wrote these words: "Today I was present at the ordination of a very special and unique man. Mark my words, he's going to do great things for our church in the future." 40 years later, his son can say, "I've seen with my own eyes the incredible work done by this holy apostle and this visionary man." And truly, he has been a great blessing for our church.
The Archbishop's ministry, both in Africa and Albania, has been one of reaching out to people, drawing them to God, and thereby drawing them to one another.
This is a hierarch who is a top theologian, for many years professor at the university, a specialist in missiology and comparative religion. You have a person involved in the international scene in a degree that very few people in the Orthodox Church have been involved. Now, the combination of all these things really are not simply sufficient. Here we could use an ordinary American expression: he is overqualified for the award.
Every year, the Order of St. Andrew, through the Archdiocese of America, presents the Athenagoras Human Rights Award. It is Orthodoxy's highest distinction in America. It is named after Ecumenical Patriarch Athenagoras, Orthodoxy's foremost ambassador of love, respect, dignity. And the award is presented to an individual or an organization who best reflects these noble principles of human rights and love for mankind. How fitting it is to honor His Beatitude Archbishop Anastasios with the 2001 Athenagoras Human Rights Award. On behalf of the Order of St. Andrew, we proclaim Axios to this humble servant of God.
I am afraid that many times we are absorbed by ourselves, and we forget that we belong to this holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And apostolic does not mean only apostolic succession and apostolic tradition, but it means to keep this apostolic flame and interest and this vision and these insights of the apostles.